Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Let me get right to it here. It might bounce around a little bit, but I've got some general points here right off the top that I want to make. Just a couple of education stories and a few jab-related things toward the end here. First of all, let me mention this very quickly. You've heard of the name Cliff High before, and I used to bring him up on the show kind of with some regularity back in the day. I stopped listening to him a long time ago because I thought, okay, this guy, he basically date fags big time. You know, he openly claims that he has a computer program that allows him to look at when particular kinds of conversations are coalescing or ramping up or what might take place regarding, again, social disorder and a number of other things, again, based on online conversations that are transpiring and news headlines and things of that nature. And then, of course, where particular stories are likely to go and in what direction. He's been wrong on a great deal. And again, he predicts particular dates and times of the year when particular things are going to happen. And then, of course, he uses these long swaths of time, like saying, well, this is likely to happen around this time, or, you know, in the next 6 months, we'll probably see something like this and whatever else. Anyway, with that aside, I decided to resubscribe to his Substack channel, which is free. And he spits out these audio messages from time to time describing a couple of things. And of course, a lot of the things that are transpiring, certainly from basically a social order standpoint. And again, different kinds of conversations that are taking place and coalescing on the internet and what that's likely to lead to. With that said, in this most recent audio message that he put out on the 11th of February here, he mentioned something which is interesting. And I can see this actually happening, and I can see, of course, numerous conversations moving in this general direction. And as he openly says, actually, it has everything to do with conversations having to do with Jewish individuals. And again, the whole Jewish question and who's behind all of this and everything that's going on, and of course, all of this money mismanagement and disclosure of financial crime and everything else. As I said in the last episode, anybody with 2 cents knows full well that this is a Jewish problem. That they're the ones that created this banking system. They're the ones that created usury. They created money laundering. They created communism. They created Bolshevism. And they created all of these tactics and methods and basically everything that we have seen that is degenerate and awful against our society and against, of course, other countries' societies for thousands of years. He basically states in his audio message, Cliff High does, that essentially the Donald Trump administration knows that these conversations are ramping up and they're well aware, which means they have to essentially do whatever they can to sort of ease individuals a little bit and get them to understand that, yes, there are bad Jews, but there are good Jews also, that not all of them are specifically interested in destroying our country or hurting the average American or whatever it may be, or even robbing people. There's a lot of truth to that. And again, in these conversations going forward here, we're starting to see a lot of individuals, again, just blindly scream the name Jew at the top of their lungs without actually honing in on what specifically is going on, and then, of course, looking at things multidimensionally. But there is no doubt, and I agree with Cliff High on this, there's no doubt that this is unavoidable, that this train is running in that direction as a societal, conversational, whatever you want to call it, dynamic that is again unavoidable. It's on the train tracks. The wall is approaching. This is going to have to be a dam that gets burst through here in order to shake things up and get people to understand that historically speaking, this has always been our problem, and a banking problem and a money problem and a child trafficking problem and every other, again, degenerate thing that you can possibly imagine. Because the things, again, that the news is reporting on regarding all of this and what, of course, DOGE is finding out, which, of course, is also the military and whistleblowers and endless other individuals, the NSA, and everything that they've discovered, this is all leaning in that direction. And as you've heard me say, of course, in the last episode, and I've said it for quite some time, that the Federal Department of Education engages in child trafficking, directly and indirectly. Of course, their weaponization of CPS, their use of unions, protecting predator teachers, etc., etc. Same thing, of course, with school districts as a whole, all of the degenerate messaging that makes its way into schools. This should prove to people that child trafficking and child sex trafficking is as a result of money flowing to and from the Federal Department of Education is not a stretch. That's not only very possible, but it is a thing that does happen and is happening and has been happening. In fact, I do have some audio I want to play in just a little bit on a different subject, albeit slightly similar. But when Donald Trump was on Air Force One the other day before the Super Bowl, he did again about a 30-minute presser where he was taking questions from press individuals in his office on Air Force One after he signed the proclamation calling the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America now, which it is official. You can get on Google Maps now and see it, and it does say Gulf of America. So there you have it. But with that said, he openly admitted, and he openly said it, that once DOGE is done with USAID, he openly said they're going to examine the Department of Education next, and then the military. Again, he's openly telling people that this is coming. And once this shows up, heads are going to explode. People are not going to believe what is actually going on at the Department of Education. Now, with that also said, there's been numerous speculation, of course, that the Department of Education is already done away with. And Elon Musk, of course, has already implied this by saying no such department exists. That can be taken a number of different ways. It doesn't exist how exactly? Does it not exist by definition, that there really was no Department of actual education taking place? Was it a department, again, that was a criminal racket? Well, the answer is yes. At the exact same time, is it still operating the way that the Department of Education used to operate? And regarding that, the answer is no. The website is still up at the Department of Education, but I have no doubt that their funds have been stopped, or at the very least slowed, or everything that's happening now at the Department of Education, if it's still up and running, is just being tracked, and it's all being traced. Again, it's a military operation that's taking place here. There's no way that they're going to disseminate this kind of information to the public without having their T's crossed and their I's dotted regarding everything that's been going on. Now, you can take a pretty good guess as to what's going to happen when they pull back that veil regarding the Department of Education and everything that they're going to find. Again, it's going to be sexual degeneracy, and that's putting it mildly. But this is going to happen because, again, you can see it in American schools. You can see it with the kinds of people that they hire. This is not an accident. So this is going to disgust the American people when they figure this out. But like I said in the last episode, on Monday, one of the larger parts that's being missed in all of this is the brainwashing apparatus that is the Department of Education, and that the content is false. Because the fact is there's too much truth out there. There's too much factual content that contradicts everything that's being taught in your average American school. This is, of course, as I've been over on the show, one of the reasons why school districts are getting rid of cell phones. They're, of course, chalking it up to cell phone addiction and saying, well, it's the kids are distracted all the time and they're looking at pornography and this, that, and the other, which, of course, is true. That all happens within school environments, but it's also because, if properly used, a cell phone can have far more truth and far more access to truth than your average school teacher in an average classroom. So again, once this veil gets pulled back and the lid gets popped off of this garbage can, what people are going to find on the inside is going to be absolutely disgusting. And it's going to be indefensible. That's the interesting part about this. Again, it's much like what we're seeing right now with USAID. It's the same kind of thing. You can't possibly defend any of this, not logically. The only people defending it are criminals. In fact, very quickly, let me read this particular post And then I have a piece of audio I want to play from a new independent media guy. He's old establishment from MSNBC, Mark Halperin. But even he has recognized that what is going on here is a plan, that this is too coordinated, that he's never seen anything like this. And of course, that there's no way that this is sort of your average presidency, that there's something else going on here. Because if it wasn't something that was unique and new, then it would basically be like we were under a George W. Bush presidency all over again. But I think everybody can clearly see that that's not the case. So there was this post from Sean Davis at SeanMDAV over on X. And again, it's a nice little summary from February 10th, but he said the following. He said, quote, "Random federal judges in blue state backwaters have no authority to unilaterally dictate who the president may talk to or what data he can access." He says John Roberts of the Supreme Court of the United States, SCOTUS, have two options here. They can bring in their inferior malcontents to heel, or they can get used to the president simply ignoring these inferior courts or Congress eliminating them entirely. Congress created these inferior courts so the Supreme Court couldn't have to deal with every federal case by itself. But if these rogue inferior judges are going to routinely issue lawless decisions that the Supreme Court has to deal with anyway, Congress would be well within its rights to just eliminate them. He says Roberts and SCOTUS can immediately put these lawless judges in their place, or Roberts can watch his caseload go up 1,000 times and his court's precious perceived legitimacy crater overnight. The age of tolerating this nonsense is over, unquote. Of course, what he's referring to is you have these radical Biden judges who are attempting to shut down Donald Trump's executive orders. They're also attempting to shut down DOGE and what they're doing regarding USAID, which means what about judges across the United States? It means that they're blackmailed and they're being asked to go after Donald Trump because, of course, they're radicals in themselves. It's not all of them, but it's plenty of them. And they're probably wrapped up in what? They're wrapped up in the same things that USAID is wrapped up in. They're wrapped up probably in child trafficking. Hell, you remember the case of the Kentucky judge. Remember that guy who was shot to death by the former sheriff of that town after the former sheriff found his daughter's phone number inside of that judge's cell phone. And they were running a sex trafficking ring, apparently, again, through that judge's office and through that particular courthouse where that judge had his office. And the former sheriff, dad, walked in there and blew him away. This is happening nationwide. This kind of illegality and reactions, I should say, to exposed illegality is happening nationwide now. It's an absolute powder keg, and it's already exploded. But again, like any explosion, some people hear it and some people don't. But it's created a level of panic that's unavoidable for the guilty. So very quickly, here's audio of Mark Halperin talking with 3 other, independent news guys, and he's discussing again what he's noticed about everything that's going on here. So give him a listen in 3, 2, 1.
I'm paid to not be baffled or speechless. That's been my job. I'm baffled and somewhat speechless. I've been thinking in the last couple of days, is there anything in my career as a journalist that I've covered that I'd compare to this? And the answer is no. I've covered, presidential campaigns, governments, Oklahoma City bombing, O.J. Simpson trial. I've covered lots of big, complex stories. I find this to be extraordinary and singular. I think that we're covering and talking about a very small percentage of what's actually happening. And I think for the reasons I've discussed at length in my writing and on Two-Way, this is a unique presidency for so many reasons. And we're seeing the manifestation of that now. It's in some ways like a first-term presidency. He's coming in, starting this term with much more energy, momentum, newness, and arrested staff. That's not like a second-term president, right? You think about the first weeks of the second term of Clinton, Bush, and Obama, it's nothing like this for obvious reasons. But it's also is the second term presidency in the sense that he's experienced. He knows more about how to do the job and what he wants. And he also had 4 years off when he wasn't sitting in courtrooms or being shot at. He had a lot of time to think about how he wanted to do this job and how to enact a revolution. And you know, the theater of it and the personality and the historical narrative arc are all, of course, super compelling. But what matters is the real lives of real people and the impact this is going to have on not just American government and the world, but American history. And I think on that score, based on the early returns here after a couple weeks, this turns the Reagan Revolution into a joke. It makes the notion that George W. Bush came to Washington to really shake things up. There's no comparison what they're doing. And it's some combination of careful planning that was hidden from view for the most part, and ad hocery that is being mostly successful because this is open field running. I'm very reluctant to use sports metaphors, but I think it's the right one. This is Travis Kelce catching the ball on his own 40 and looking around and seeing there's no one near him. And he's just barreling downfield. The Democrats are nowhere on the field. The press is nowhere on the field. The liberal interest groups are nowhere on the field. And the reasons for their being so ill prepared, I think, will be studied eventually. But the reality of it now is just, I've never seen anything like not just the activity, but the inability of his opponents to forget stopping him. They're barely, with a few exceptions, even slowing him down.
He's right. He's right on basically everything that he said. And even in his explanation, he's leaving out endless things that have taken place that have brought us to where we are now. The Q posts are just one example. You're not going to hear a Mark Halperin bring up Q posts and how we were told about USAID and groups like it back then in 2018 and years in between 2018 and certainly 2022 when Q stopped making posts. But again, we've been told this. I mean, this is obvious to us when it comes to, again, government wasteful spending, government drug running, our government specifically, of course, doing all of those things, running guns, running children, all of it. This has all been coming out for numerous years, and many of us have known this for a very long time. He, of course, is saying there isn't anything that seems to be able to stop any of this, and even the media isn't even bringing up the most important aspects of this. He's right. They're not. Because if they did, and the more they bring up specifics and the more they dig in, the more it just shines a giant light and a mirrored reflection on them. Because they're wrapped up in it. They're responsible. Every single time that they don't cover a story that has to do with illegality in government, they're implicated in the cover-up. Again, we're talking about basically the largest RICO statute case in the history of the world. And it's our own government. So all of the people defending said government and all of the departments that exist and claiming that we need all of these departments and all of this has to continue to exist and anything that happens against them is just wrong or, can't happen. That's coming from two different wavelengths of thought. It's coming from the naive who have no idea what they're talking about, like school board members, for example. And then on the other end, it largely comes from those who are engaged in the most heinous acts of illegality that you can possibly imagine. So that's the Civil War also. And again, you've heard me bring that up before, the interagency Civil War. It's not just a purposeful civil war in that one side is trying to destroy the other in order to protect themselves, but it's almost a forced civil war. Because they want to get out of this situation and they don't know how, so what's the only thing that they can do? Well, they start to attack their own. This again is why you have the FBI leaking information about ICE raids. There's your interagency civil war between FBI and ICE. But there's also an interagency civil war just within the FBI, where you have whistleblowers in the FBI telling, of course, good people in ICE who the bad guys are within the FBI. This is happening in every department. This has been happening for a very long time, but it's, of course, all coming to a head here, and it's a beautiful thing to watch. And with that said, there's also this, which I alluded to in the last episode, the business of a government shutdown. Because of all of this fraud that's been released here, Congress is being put purposefully in a position where they won't want to fund the federal government because they can't, and they shouldn't. In fact, if they vote to do so, it almost looks like, again, they're involved too, unless, of course, good guys have gotten to them and control them about the decisions that are being made on their end, certainly the so-called Republicans, quote unquote. But there was this post on Great Awakening, which I thought was interesting, kind of sums this up nicely. It was titled, "The Fraud is Going to Force a Government Shutdown." It says, "Ain't no way in hell Trump is going to ask for a $2 trillion bill after this fraud. I think the goal is to map out exactly how much waste, fraud, and abuse there was before the need for a new government funding bill. Imagine how much waste there is at the Pentagon or in the Pentagon." It says Trump was very happy to give the Pentagon money, and after that number comes out, question mark. It says, imagine the reaction when, for example, the Congress sends its $2 trillion budget to Trump, and he vetoes it, stating that due to the fraud, he won't sign a bill that's more than, say, $850 billion. Congress could try to pass with 2/3 if enough Dems vote to override the veto after voting against it, but you only need a simple majority to forward a bill to the president. It says, but my money is Trump will call the Dems bluff and say, I agree, we'll have a shutdown. But don't you for a second think you're going to get anything close to $2 trillion, unquote. I think that's very likely to happen, not to mention with a government shutdown, if it does shut down, that gives him the right, of course, to fire even more people that he already has fired. Again, individuals have already shown up back to work because they were told to, only to find out that the building that they were working in no longer exists and the doors are closed and they're being turned away. Again, lots of people are seeing this from the outside looking in, and they're, of course, asking themselves, why are all of the Democrats screaming at the top of their lungs? And then, of course, they should be asking themselves, why is it that most of the Republicans are staying pretty darn quiet about all of this? It's because even the Republicans in the House and the Senate don't know what the hell's going on. This was all coordinated. This was all on purpose. And again, a person can't logically say anymore, even though there are endless accounts on X that are refusing to even look at this just one slight dimension, a little different rather, and a little deeper than what their small brains can possibly comprehend. And I know that's insulting, but it's true, is that all these massive accounts of all these dudes who claim to be on the hard right, calling, again, Donald Trump Zion, Don, and all this other stuff, why is it that he's shutting down and exposing the entire Zionist apparatus of money laundering, stealing, robbery, child trafficking, etc., etc.? If he was really a Zionist, would he be doing that? Would he be blowing up the United States government the way that it's being blown up right now? I find that impossible to believe. Again, very famously, the Q post saving Israel for last. That's what's happening here. There has to be a complete shift in the social order of things to where individuals are exposed for doing what they've been doing in the past for a very long time. We're specifically talking about Jewish individuals, of course, and we know it's not all of them, but it's the ones who are certainly controlling a great deal of what's been going on this entire time. And the simple fact that that should be the dead giveaway, that that's the fact and that that's the element, is because that's the one thing that's not being discussed regarding USAID and these other departments. What's the one thing they all have in common? Again, these are the same guys online on the hard right who openly will show those memes that show all of these Jewish individuals working for these administrations, certainly Biden's first administration and even Donald Trump's first administration, but it's showing all these individuals, and again, more specifically Biden's administration, working within all of these agencies and these three-letter agencies and being the ones who run them. But now all these agencies are being exposed and blown out of the water, which means not only are all of those memes true, that a great deal of these individuals are Jewish, but at the exact same time, they're all now unemployed. And they're all being exposed. If Donald Trump was a Zionist, why would he be doing that? These individuals stick together like glue. But he's blowing all of this up. Now that leads me to this, which again is one of the things that is slightly multidimensional, but it leads back into how there has to be a restructuring of the social order and a conversation about the Jewish question, which is something, again, that has to get fixed in this country. Because there's too many people in denial about what's going on all sides of the so-called aisle. They just don't understand what's happening here. When Donald Trump was on the airplane, and I have the audio to play here to prove my point, I think, and certainly prove what I think is happening, and again, this is my opinion, is that Donald Trump is openly talking about, again, what he wants to do with Gaza. He says, we're going to own it. The United States will own it, but we won't necessarily be the ones who build on it. Other neighboring countries can build on it, and of course, lots of people can live there. As I brought up in a previous episode, I think it was Friday's episode, last Friday, this right here again neuters Israel, and it neuters Zionists over there in the Middle East. It keeps them from being able to expand that land for themselves by giving everybody a piece of the proverbial pie that exists there, knowing full well that the people who have been living there as slaves. The Palestinians have been target practice for the IDF since the moment that that the Jews showed up in Palestine. Again, everybody knows this. This is a historic fact. So why wouldn't people get behind this idea that entire area needs to be cleaned out, that individuals, whether it be temporarily or what have you, need to move to neighboring countries and live in peace in clean homes with running water and clean clothes and food and the whole thing? Why is that so hard for people to understand that that's actually a good thing? While at the exact same time neutering the Zionist Jews that exist over there in Israel and quote-unquote God's chosen people. It pulls the rug right out from underneath them and what they had planned. Now again, as I've brought up before, and I don't mean to, beat a dead horse here and be a broken record, but endless people, of course, have brought up, well, Sean, that's the greatest, that's the greater Israel project, and that's what that means. And they're taking the land, and then soon they'll take even more, and they'll just take more, and it'll still have money investors, and those people will be Jewish, and it's still basically the same kind of thing that they wanted to do in the first place. It just might be called something else. We don't know that. Nobody knows that. Nobody knows what the long-term plan is here. But when Donald Trump was asked the question on the plane, which I'll play the audio here in just a second, he was asked, why is it that neighboring countries are already turning away Palestinians and saying that they're not going to take them? He brings up two things. Number one, he says, the Palestinians have never had an option. They've never had an alternative to live anywhere else and to live another way. The only thing that they know while living there is slavery and being target practice for the IDF and being raped, murdered, kidnapped, and then blamed for wars that are actually not their fault at all. That's the first thing. He says they've never had an alternative. If given an alternative, like here's your clean home over here that you can live in peacefully without getting bombed, want to go over here instead of the sandbox that you're living in with the concrete and rebar that's coming down on top of your head? The answer is yes. They're going to want to live there. But Donald Trump knows who blew up Palestine. He's well aware of this. He knows who Hamas really is. He's the president of the United States. Why would he not know? Why would he not have access to social media? Again, it's so obvious that it's on social media. He even makes this comment, which you'll hear in just a minute. He brings up the business of the hostages. And he says, I'm running out of patience when it comes to this because what's going on over there is terrible. He says, I'm seeing these emaciated hostages get off of these helicopters and be released, and it looks like they've just survived the Holocaust, he says, from back in the old days. They're completely emaciated, like they haven't had anything to eat in months. There's only one group doing that to people, and it's Zionist Jews doing it to Palestinians. It's not Palestinians doing it to Jews. Everyone knows this. Everyone is aware of this. Again, I put the video clip of this in one of the previous war videos of, again, an older Jewish woman, and she's being interviewed after so-called being a hostage. And she's being asked questions, and she was like, we were treated perfectly. We were given shampoo, we were given clean, good food, 3 meals a day. We had a bed to sleep on. We had soap to wash ourselves. It was fine. They treated us great. And then all of a sudden, they shut it down. They shut down the entire interview. People in the background started giving the old, hand across the throat motion. Cameras turned off, and that was the last time they've talked with so-called Jewish, hostages of some kind. Because they're not being starved. The ones that are being starved to death and tortured are Palestinians. They're the ones not being fed. Donald Trump knows this. He knows Netanyahu is a bad guy. He knows he's the worst. And again, someone would say, well, Sean, there was a news report out there that the ICC and the International Court have been sanctioned by Donald Trump and the Republican-controlled House, and the judges' families have been told that they're not allowed to travel, and they can't do this and they can't do that. I'm not going to pretend to know all the ins and outs as to why that's even happening. Maybe it's designed to protect them. I don't know. Maybe Donald Trump has intel on those individuals and knows that there are people who want those judges dead. And maybe, I don't know, but maybe the evidence that they have is also evidence that the United States military wants. And maybe the United States military, of course, knows what's been going on over there too. And maybe Benjamin Netanyahu's days are numbered. So with all of that said, listen to the word usage and what Donald Trump says here when he's asked again, he's asked 3 times on the airplane about Gaza and what he plans on doing and what he wants to do. This was the second time, because the first time when he was asked, he said, well, it's complicated and I'm not going to talk about it. That's all he said. And then they moved on to separate questions. But this was the second time he was asked about it. So give this a listen in 3, 2, 1.
Gaza. The White House press secretary told us last week that you're committed to rebuilding Gaza. Steve Witkoff said that process would take 10 to 15 years. Does your commitment to rebuilding Gaza extend beyond your time in office?
I'm committed to buying and owning Gaza. As far as us rebuilding it, we may give it to other states in the Middle East to build sections of it. Other people may do it through our auspices. But we're committed to owning it, taking it, and making sure that Hamas doesn't move back. There's nothing to move back into. The place is a demolition site. It'll be, the remainder will be demolished. Everything's demolished. I mean, you can't live in those buildings right now. They're very unsafe. But we'll make it into a very good site for future development by somebody. We'll let other countries develop parts of it. It'll be beautiful. People can come from all over the world and live there. But we're going to take care of the Palestinians. We're going to make sure they live beautifully and in harmony and in peace, and that they're not murdered. This has been the most dangerous site anywhere in the world to live in. Hamas has been a disaster. And by the way, I have to tell you that I watched the hostages come back today, and they look like Holocaust survivors. They were in horrible condition. They were emaciated. It looked like many years ago, the Holocaust survivors, and I don't know how much longer we can take that. When I watch that, I know we have a deal where we're supposed to they dribble in and keep dribbling in, but they are in really bad shape. They have been treated brutally, horribly. Even the ones that came out earlier, they were in a little bit better shape, but mentally they were treated so badly. Who could take that? At some point, we're going to lose our patience. When I see that scene that I saw today with people coming out of helicopters and airplanes that are emaciated, that look like they haven't had a meal in a month, there's no reason for that. And I don't know how much longer we can take it.
Do you mean you want to recast?
I don't know how long we can take it. When I watch people that were healthy people a reasonably short number of years ago, and you look at them today, they look like they've aged 25 years. They literally look like the old pictures of Holocaust survivors. The same thing. I mean, the same thing. And I don't know how long we're going to take that.
Mr. President, have you got some advancement in your proposals for some of the Gulf or air bases to take some of the Palestinian people? And if not,
Yeah.
like, what do you think the reason is for their hesitance? Is there some very honest reason that they've even told you privately, or that you think why they're hesitant to take the Palestinian people?
Why are they hesitant to take them? Because they never spoke to me. They spoke to other people. They didn't speak to me. When they speak to me, they're going to take them.
Is it because they think that you would not allow them to return to Gaza? Is
No,
that part of it?
they don't want to return to Gaza. If we could give them a home in a safer area, the only reason they're talking about returning to Gaza is they don't have an alternative. When they have an alternative, they don't want to return to Gaza. If they had a home that was safe, where you don't have Hamas threatening them, killing them, torturing them, they'd rather not return to Gaza. But right now, Gaza is the only alternative. As far as the other regions, the only reason they maybe don't act enthusiastic is they haven't talked to me. They talk to other people, but not to me. When they talk to me, they'll be enthusiastic.
Again, sorry for the audio. Of course, he was on an airplane. He was on Air Force One, so my apologies on that. But either way, he's shitting all over Netanyahu. I mean, it can't get more obvious. He's saying everything that Netanyahu hates. What does Netanyahu want? He wants all the Palestinians dead. He wants the land for himself. He wants to falsify more wars by using Hamas, which is funded by Israel and the IDF, and wait until the American taxpayer figures this out, but we've been funding them too. We've been funding that false enemy that exists over there so that they can continue again to manufacture all of their wars. And when he openly said, again, he doesn't sound like a guy who's being uncompassionate. He knows what's going on there. He knows who the enemy is. That's why people, who are like, well, he's Zion Don. I'm sorry, I don't buy it. I don't buy it. Look at everything that's being exposed right now. It's too on purpose. It's too purposeful. But people, again, they don't want to be wrong. If I'm wrong, I'll openly come back and be like, well, I screwed all that up. I was wrong on everything. But I'm telling you, I can see between the lines here on a lot of this because it's right in front of our faces. It's just, for me, this is just face value stuff. But he doesn't sound like he's being uncompassionate about Palestinians. He says, I want to give them a place to live in peace. Why is that a bad thing? Why are people trying to spin that into being a bad thing? Certainly the people, again, on even the hard right, like the Stu Peterses of the world. It makes zero sense. And when he brings up the point again about the Holocaust, I think he's shining a light on individuals being emaciated because if anybody gets online and looks up emaciated prisoners in the Middle East, the only people you see are Palestinians. They're not Jewish. They're not Jewish hostages. It's the exact opposite. So he knows who the emaciated people are. He knows. He knows what Netanyahu and the IDF have been doing to them. He's well aware. I've got footage again that I'll put in the next war video, and it's on my X account, and it's also on Gab. This dude is describing how he was in a refugee camp and he was kidnapped by the IDF and taken prisoner in December of, I think, 2023. The dude is gaunt. I mean, he's got no fat in his cheeks. It's all just facial bones. I mean, that's it. But yeah, he does look like a prisoner of war. But there's only one group over there doing that to people, and it's Jews. And when Donald Trump again says the only reason that the neighboring countries haven't accepted them yet is because they haven't talked to him yet. Well, what on earth can he offer them that would cause those countries, those neighboring countries, to house safely Palestinian refugees? You look at those neighboring countries as the president of the United States, and you simply say, we know it's the Jews doing this. I know that they're your enemy. They've been ours for a long time. He says this behind closed doors, and then they go, yep, we know it too. And he goes, so take these individuals, and then all of us, not Israel, but all of us will have stake in Gaza and in that small little geographic area to make sure that Israel stays right where they are. That's my 2 cents on the issue here. Notice how he's, again, not identifying who the Palestinians and the Jews are in that entire situation. He openly also just said, as you heard him say, he said, Palestinians are being murdered. Who's murdering them? He knows who's murdering them. It's not Palestinians killing Palestinians. It's not Hamas killing Palestinians. That narrows it down to just one group of people. So if he was such a Zionist, why would he be highlighting the very crime that the Zionists are engaging in over there? And specifically Netanyahu. He wouldn't be doing it. Again, this is about world peace. And it's also, as even Cliff High again was alluding to, this is going to be the precipice of this conversation as this continues to unfold. He openly said again, America isn't going to pay for what's going on over there, it's ours. If he can just take it, then he's taking it with his words because he owns those people over there. He owns the Jews over there. He knows exactly what they've done, what they've supported, what Netanyahu has done and supported. He knows what they've done. Which means, yes, he can just walk over there and say, it's going to be ours. But other people are going to live there. Everybody's going to live there. It's the exact opposite of what Netanyahu wanted. He wanted that for Jews and Jews alone. He wanted that again for the Khazarian Mafia and that bloodline. He wanted it for them. He's not going to get it now. And that's a beautiful thing, because world peace is the goal here. It's about, of course, yes, waking up individuals to this level of illegality and this crime and all of these people that they've supported this entire time, and of course making sure that Netanyahu never speaks to Congress ever again. I think that's all going to come out in the future. I don't know when. I don't have a date on that. But this social order has to shift regarding the whole Jewish question, and it's going to happen because it's all you see online all of the time. It's constant. But there's dead people asleep, and dead asleep people, rather, on both sides of that spectrum. Somewhere in the middle is the real answer as to what's really going on, and it's not even on that same wavelength. It's on a separate dimension because people don't understand that there's a plan taking place here. As Mark Halpern even said, the simple fact, going back to the DOGE stuff and all of this disclosure of our own federal government and these agencies and this money laundering, that alone should prove that this is a coordinated step-by-step dissemination for the American people, and that this plan has been actually in place for a very long time, and Donald Trump is just the figurehead, and his administration is going to be used to disseminate this information. So it's not that everybody around him is a good person. You might actually see some serious public resignations of people who are around him who are close to him. Take, for example, that woman who is his, whatever her name is, the so-called spiritual leader of the White House and the Donald Trump administration. The woman is a nutbag. absolute nutbag. She's an she's an evangelist, basically. She screams and she shouts, and wherever I stand, I mean, very famous video of her screaming and yelling, wherever I stand, Jesus Christ is standing, and wherever I go, he's there. And if I stand in the White House, then that's where Jesus Christ is. She's not a prophet. She's not a prophet. She's also an Israel first. Israel's our greatest ally, blah, 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 blah. And of course, when she goes over to Israel, what happens? Well, she gets the tour, and she gets the preferential treatment, rather, because, of course, she's being paid by them. By the way, Trump has also pulled out the chair for her at that same table that Netanyahu was sitting at, too, and had her sit in the chair as she pushed it in. He's highlighting these people on purpose because they're all in it. As far as I'm concerned, she's a spy. But, I don't have any proof of that, just the fact that evangelists are dirty. And they're all interested in money and grifting off of people, and you need to give money to me and pass the plate to me because Jesus Christ said so. I don't think so. It's not really how it's supposed to work. So no one should take her seriously. I don't think anybody does, but that's kind of the point here, is that she's going to be caught between a rock and a hard place when more truth comes out here. Same thing with Mike Huckabee. Remember, old Governor Huckabee. Mike Huckabee is the ambassador to Israel. He might not want that job in the future. He might not want that job. Because notice how none of them are talking about the slaughter of Palestinians, and Donald Trump just said on the airplane, they're murdering Palestinians over there. Who's the they? We know who they are. So I'm going to get off of that subject here just for now and for this episode, but I'm telling you, this is coming to a head here. And it's going to be unavoidable, even for those who claim to have all of the answers. I certainly do not. But I guarantee that more revelations are going to come out regarding all of this. Again, all a person has to ask themselves is one thing. Why is he saying what he's saying, the way he's saying it? It's a very unique way of communicating with people, because he's trying to shine a light on who exactly has destroyed that entire land. In fact, my apologies. Let me bring up one last thing. I saw a clip of Stu Peters talking about this the other day on X. He was yelling about it in a small little clip that he made, making clips of himself and then putting it out there. It was when the new press secretary, in I believe her first or second press conference in the press room, of course they brought the TVs back, so both TVs are next to her. And she brings up Gaza, and she shows, again, the landscape of Gaza. She shows a picture of the blown-out buildings and how everything is destroyed. And she says, Donald Trump says he's going to own it, and America will own it, and America will help the people, and this, that, and the other. And she's showing the imagery. Stu Peters was yelling, well, why don't they say who it is that's doing it? What Stu Peters doesn't understand is they don't have to say it. It's obvious. They don't have to come out and be like, see this picture on the TV? Look what the Jews did. She doesn't have to say that. It's obvious. It's obvious who blew apart that entire chunk of land, killed all of those people, men, women, and children, used them as target practice, took down those buildings with bombs, which probably had USA written on the side, as those buildings collapsed on top of endless families that were innocent. People already know. And by showing that imagery to the people in the press room, it highlights their fraud because they're not asking the question, because they're involved. So you simply take their inability to recognize what's obvious to endless people, shove it right in their face, and you put them between a rock and a hard place also. Because it exposes them for working for whom exactly? Zionists. See what I mean? Again, Stu Peters yells about why they're not screaming Jew at the top of their lungs behind the lectern inside of the press office when you're the press secretary. Because she can't do that, and that's not her job right now. But she can show you the entire bombed out landscape and who was responsible for it without saying it because it's obvious. So I'm going to let it go there for now, but yeah, that's all happening. If people can just read between the lines here, This is a good thing. Again, it's painful to watch, but it's happening here, and it's moving in a better direction, which is good. Okay, back to USAID just for a second. Amazing Polly has made 2 recent videos as of late. They're brief, they're her just talking on her channel. She, of course, is on BitChute, and I believe she has an Odyssey channel as well, but she says that she's going to basically stop or slow down posting on Rumble because of the people who operate Rumble and them not being the best people on planet Earth, and they certainly aren't. But she brings up some interesting points again about some of the it's basically everything that I mentioned in the last episode on Monday. That a lot of these so-called grifters and individuals claiming that they're receiving funds from just their listeners and that's the only way that they can keep their show going, like Tracy Beans, for example, that's not true. That Tracy Beans was the so-called secretary for one of Mike Flynn's or Joe Flynn, his brother, whoever it was, one of their NGO conglomerate organizations or nonprofits, as it were. Again, to the tune of at least $60,000. So the answer is no. She's not funded by her listeners because she doesn't have that much of a listening audience and they're not giving her that kind of money. So Polly points this out, of course, and then calls her a liar, which, of course, Tracy Beans is. Because you're lying to your listeners and you're begging for money. So that's not good. Anyway, with that said, she brings up a number of other issues and highlights a number of other things, and she's accurate and she's right. Just turns out that I brought it up on Monday's episode to a great extent, so yeah. Either way, I'm glad Polly's back to making videos, and I hope she continues to do so, because she's fearless, and she calls out individuals, no matter what side of the so-called aisle or how deep down the rabbit holes they appear to go. But she calls them out, which is a beautiful thing. So yeah, feel free and check out her videos also. There was also this was making the rounds the other day and didn't get a lot of attention from hardly anybody. This is from the Herald.ng, and it was titled, Federal Whistleblower Claims Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, every single time, ordered Trump's assassination. It says a federal whistleblower has come forward with allegations that Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro was involved in the July 13th, 2024 assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania. The whistleblower identified as Hadassa Feinberg, that's to be believed, a former Pennsylvania State Police employee, filed a criminal complaint on February 7th of 2025 detailing claims that Shapiro conspired with other officials to orchestrate the attack as part of a political scheme. This is from Pennsylvania arrest warrants on X, I believe, or on Facebook, rather. It says, it's hard to believe that there may be a bigger story today than the final score of the Super Bowl. President Donald Trump learned today that a federal whistleblower and former PA State Police employee has come forward with information and filed a criminal complaint this week on February 7th, 2025, allegedly linking Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro with the assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania. Allegations from the private criminal complaint say, quote, in the weeks leading up to the Trump rally, President Joseph R. Biden made frequent visits to defendant Joshua Shapiro to discuss the obstacle faced by the Democratic Party, even though it's Democrat, but anyway. It says Joshua Shapiro organized, schemed, and conspired with other officials to carry out the attempted assassination against former President Donald J. Trump. It says Governor Josh Shapiro facilitated, planned, and coordinated the attempted assassination to climb the political ladder. It goes on here. It says on July 15th of 2024 through July 23rd of 2024, this affiant communicated with Secret Service agent John T. Donahue and provided numerous documents related to the crimes committed by Governor Joshua Shapiro and the Philadelphia FBI's involvement, in covering up the crimes of defendant Joshua Shapiro. Agent John T. Donahue sent the complaint to headquarters, but the Biden administration blocked it. It says on March 9th of 2024, Supervisory Special Agent Kenneth Keller advised this affiant through email that he contacted the FBI Philadelphia personnel FBI Victim Service and management at the Washington field office, and that they advised him to direct the affiant to Philadelphia FBI. Agent Kenneth Keller informed this affiant that the crimes being reported are not occurring in his jurisdiction. Well, that wouldn't make sense that they would contact the FBI on March 9th before the shooting took place. So that doesn't make any sense. I'll finish this up anyway. It says, Agent Kenneth Keller informed the affiant that the crimes being reported are not occurring in his jurisdiction and that he has no jurisdiction to assist Pennsylvania victims. He advised the affiant to contact the Department of Justice. This affiant contacted the Department of Justice and Federal Bureau of Investigation. Up until recently, ex-FBI Director Christopher Wray was conspiring with the Biden administration in concealing the reports. Now that he has resigned, the private criminal complaint, must be investigated. Let's see. It says the complaint accuses Shapiro of working alongside Pennsylvania State Police Commissioner Christopher Paris, to facilitate and later conceal the assassination attempt. Feinberg alleges that Paris made false statements under oath to the Senate Judiciary Committee in August of 2024, blaming the United States Secret Service for security failures to divert attention from Shapiro's alleged involvement. She asserts that Trump was shot from within the Pennsylvania State Police perimeter at the rally, not from the area under Secret Service control, which contradicts official reports. It then says, beyond the assassination attempt, the complaint alleges a broader pattern of corruption involving Shapiro, including claims that he engaged in election interference in Pennsylvania in 2020, obstructed multiple criminal investigations, and laundered money through Ukraine. Feinberg claims that Shapiro's ties to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky were evident in a 2024 meeting where Shapiro allegedly signed bombs in a publicized photo op with Zelensky. We all remember that one. She argues that Trump's re-election would expose Shapiro's financial dealings, motivating the governor to participate in an effort to eliminate him politically and physically. It says the complaint also links billionaire Alex Soros to the alleged plot, claiming that Soros made credible threats against Trump before the assassination attempt. Feinberg asserts that despite these threats, Soros has never been criminally investigated. We remember his online posts, too, if you recall. They were rather cryptic and basically calling for Trump to be killed. Very strange, to say the least. It goes on, it says the accusations against Shapiro and Paris have led to legal filings, including a RICO lawsuit in the Pennsylvania Commonwealth Court, where both officials are named in connection with alleged corruption and public fraud. Feinberg states that on February 5th of 2025, multiple federal witnesses, including Gregory Stenstrom, Leah Hoops, and Sean Connolly, provided testimony supporting claims of state and federal crimes committed by Shapiro over the past decade. Despite the serious nature of the allegations, Butler County District Attorney Richard Goldinger has declined to pursue Feinberg's private criminal complaint. In a letter dated August 22, 2024, Goldinger acknowledged receipt of the complaint, but cited ongoing investigations by various government agencies as the reason for disapproval. It says, as of now, neither Governor Josh Shapiro nor Commissioner Christopher Paris has publicly responded to the allegations, unquote. If this is true, then clearly Trump and his administration and the military are well aware of this. In fact, you may recall that I brought this up back on the show, and a lot of people, of course, were discussing this, certainly on some of the more alternative chat boards, we'll say, but they were openly talking about how that entire operation regarding, again, the Butler, Pennsylvania rally, that it was basically a giant scheme set up by the good guys in order to surveil the communications of the bad guys and use Space Force and the NSA in order to do that. And again, run military airplanes over top of the area or drones over top of the area to hone in on particular individuals' cell phones and communications and XYZ. So yeah, I mean, that was a theory that was bouncing around. It kind of makes sense. And again, time will tell with all of this. But there were people involved in that who have not been arrested. And I bet a lot of people were involved in that. So time will tell. Again, there's a there's a lot of angry people right now because a lot of people are hearing about all of this illegality. And yet no arrests have been made publicly that we know of yet. And people's patience, of course, is running thin. And I don't know. We might have to just be a little bit more patient. But time will tell with all of this. But yeah, we need to see a hanging. There needs to be a high-profile arrest here of a very well-known, very unliked individual. And then individuals. And then hopefully a suicide weekend where these individuals realize that the walls are closing in. And then they just decide to start offing themselves. That would be nice. I'd be all for that. Okay. A few education stories here. First of all, a couple of local issues and then some more national stuff, although this is kind of national as well because this kind of thing is happening all over the country. In the county north of me, there apparently was a teacher in Preble County, Ohio, who was arrested for allegedly sexual battery toward female students, one can assume. This individual's name is a Garrett Smith, male, born in 1993, again, employee of the Preble County School District, Preble Shawnee School District, allegedly a music teacher, and they have been booked into jail. Of course, this happens in endless counties and endless states on a day in and day out basis. But this was titled, the following here on February 9th. It says on Friday, February 7th, it says district received notice of allegations involving high school, middle school teacher Garrett Smith. It says the district immediately placed Mr. Smith on administrative leave, relieving Mr. Smith of all of his district-related duties and prohibiting his presence on district property. It says the district has been in contact with local law enforcement and is also undertaking an independent investigation of the allegations brought to our attention. His status is subject to change as circumstances evolve. So yeah, again, things like this regarding the sexual nature of teachers and students in school happens on the regular. Here's another one. This one made CBS News. It was titled Colorado Teacher Who Had Sexual Relationship with Special Needs Student Sent to Prison. A former Lakewood paraprofessional was sentenced last week in a sexual assault crime that began after a special needs student left hints about an inappropriate relationship on a class assignment. It says the boy's writings were witnessed by a teacher in November of 2023. It says at the time, the Lakewood Police Department was notified and an investigation launched. It uncovered a sexual relationship between a 16-year-old and one of the school's paraprofessionals named Imagine K. Ewers. It says Ewer, 28 years old, a lot of typos in this article, 28 years old, was sentenced on January 31st of this year to 4 years in the Colorado Department of Corrections and at least 10 years of sex offender probation. That probation could last the rest of her life, depending on your success or failure with a sex offender treatment program. Pled guilty last November to sexual assault on a child and contributed to the delinquency of a minor, both felonies, a month before she was scheduled to go to trial. Prosecutors dismissed 3 other felony counts and 1 misdemeanor in exchange for her guilty plea. They should have thrown the book at her. No deals. No pleas, no nothing. Let's see. It says her plea came 1 year after Brady Exploration School staff called police. It says, according to a press release from the 1st Judicial District Attorney's Office, Lakewood Criminal Investigation revealed her obvious favoritism for the victim was noticed by school staff almost immediately, after Ewer began working there in August of 2023. Evidence of possibly inappropriate relationship began a month later, per prosecutors. Ultimately, the investigators found thousands upon thousands upon thousands of text messages, it says, in quotes, evidence of the introduction of drugs, alcohol, and weapons, and references to numerous sexual encounters as described by prosecutors. It says, at the sentencing hearing, 1st Judicial District Attorney's Office Special Victims Prosecutor, there's a title, Bryn Chase, said Ewer brought illicit substances into the relationship with the boy, including fentanyl. Ewer also repeatedly asked the boy to bring a gun to their sexual encounters and directed him to bring the gun to school and shoot another faculty member in the leg. Good Lord. I'm sorry. That just tickles me. I'm sorry. That just tickles me. That's funny. So she's clearly on drugs. Wow. Here's special ed kid. Let's have sex and use drugs. And oh, by the way, bring your gun to our sexual encounters. And one more thing. Come to work with me and shoot this coworker in the leg. Oh, what an environment. What an environment. But there's a whole lot of learning going on in that building. What do you think? Holy God. It says, quote, the defendant preyed on my son, she said, as indicated in the DA's press release, quote, leading him to believe she genuinely cared for him, all while exploiting him for money and manipulating him into thinking he was the one. What makes this even more painful is that I trusted the defendant. Had I known what was truly happening, I would have never allowed her such close access to him. Ewer stood before the judge and expressed remorse. Quote, I just want to apologize to the victim and the victim's family. She said, according to the DA's office, I'm really sorry. This will never happen again, but I wish I would have shot my coworker in the leg. I added that last part. Again, Jefferson County District Court Judge Chantel Kungugla, no way I get that last name, noted that the case was Ewer's first adult felony conviction per the DA's office, but she also expressed concern for aggravating circumstances of the case and the fact that Ewer was arrested for drug possession in Douglas County while awaiting her trial in Jefferson County. Yeah, she's got a problem. Whatever, throw the book at her and let her rot. Unbelievable. Now there's this one. This was interesting too, and Cicely sent me this. This was an article from College Fix, and it links a study within the actual article, which is, of course, what the article is about. But the study itself was titled Predicting College Closures and Financial Distress. This was from the Federal Reserve Bank out of Philadelphia, and this was one of their working papers in their research department. This was published in December of 2024. Long story short, what they did is they created basically an AI system to determine whether or not colleges were likely to stay afloat financially or demographically speaking. If they took this AI system and plugged it into their financial status and their enrollment status, and it would again predict how long they have until particular things end up happening where they might have to make a decision about making cuts or even closing their doors altogether. The actual study itself concluded the following. I'm just reading the last portion of the abstract here, but it said our preferred model, which combines an off-the-shelf machine learning algorithm with the richest set of explanatory variables, can significantly improve predictive accuracy even for institutions with complete data, but is particularly helpful for predicting instances of financial distress for institutions with spotty data. It says, finally, we conduct simulations using our estimates to contemplate likely increases in future closures, showing that enrollment challenges resulting from an impending demographic cliff, they say, are likely to significantly increase annual college closures for reasonable scenarios. Yeah. Now we know why. They, of course, strike it up to economic reasons as being one of the variables. In fact, they say not only are economic variables one of the reasons, but they say that just because the economy is likely to get better doesn't mean that families are going to want to waste any newfound wealth on higher ed. That they've learned their lesson, certainly over the last 4 years, And they've basically said, we're done with it no matter what. We're going to find another way of educating you, get another job somewhere else, do something else, what have you. And then, of course, I'm sure that the birth rate decline is included in all of that. But we also know the real reason. That large, overwhelming albatross that is never mentioned, which, of course, is the biological weapon, masquerading as a preventative medicine. That's one of the major reasons also. The College Fix article here says the following. It says, this estimate comes as 28 colleges shut down last year, according to data from the State Higher Education Executive Officers Association. Over the past 8 years, more than 100 colleges have shut down, as reported by the College Fix. It says the authors of this study call the trend a major higher education policy issue, quote unquote. One of the researchers provided further comment to the Fix via email. A Robert Kletchen, a visiting scholar at the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia Consumer Finance Institute, described 3 main drivers contributing to the declining enrollment. It says these 3 factors are, quote, a decline in the number of high school graduates in much of the country, a decline in the share of high school graduates going to college, and a decline in older student enrollment due to a solid economy. It says not much can be done about the first factor, as it's a math problem that colleges cannot solve, Kletchen told the Fix via email. They said the second is something that may change in the future when we get the next recession, but there is more skepticism about the value of higher education than in the past. No kidding. He said that the third largest is due to the ability to get decent jobs now without college, which typically changes during recessions, unquote. It says the model has already been tested and found to be largely successful. It goes on here. It says the analysis selected, quote, 100 institutions with the highest predicted probability of closure based on factors such as enrollment declines, high tuition discounts, and shrinking endowments, among others, according to the report. It says these included declining enrollment, weak finances that have triggered federal oversight, demographic shifts, and an over-reliance on tuition revenue. Researchers found 84 of these 100 institutions had closed within 3 years. It also goes on this long run about how closures could hurt small towns the most. And I think Oxford, Ohio, where I live, is a perfect example of that. Miami University is a ghost town. So yeah, that's going to have an impact on local businesses, no doubt about it. Less students, less money. The businesses get less money because, of course, there's less students, and those students don't have as much money to spend, which means, of course, they're not going to be spending it at those businesses, and the businesses, of course, don't make nearly as much as they used to in the past with higher demographics, etc., etc. The thing to keep in mind, too, is that just within this study, they openly said that they used their AI algorithmic system on 100 institutions. They didn't use it on every institution across the United States. So out of those 100, it had approximately 80 to 84 of them with what they call, of course, a high probability of closure based on reasonable scenarios. So, yeah. If this were used across the nation, or this algorithm was used across the nation at every single institution, regardless of size, that number of closures in the future, I think, would be overwhelming. I just can't imagine people wanting to go to a brick-and-mortar college these days anymore. I really can't. I'm not saying they don't, and I'm not even saying that there are bad schools out there, but hell, you got even Donald Trump criticizing Harvard, which is a nice thing, finally. Again, he used to be very big on the Ivy League schools. Well, they came from Harvard, and they came from Yale, and they came from this, and they came from that. Again, it could have been double talk and double speak trying to expose those horrible institutions, but even they're crumbling. Okay, shifting gears here, on to jab-related stuff. First of all, let me bring up the Super Bowl very quickly. I find this interesting that when it comes to a lot of the communications and the so-called comms that were taking place throughout the Super Bowl, some people were picking up on particular things, some people weren't, some people were analyzing it, some people weren't. Some people I think were getting some things right, and I don't think some people were getting things right at all. It was all over the place as far as the comms were concerned. Some people, again, were saying that the bad guys have learned their lesson, and nothing bad is going to happen in the future, and the good guys are in control regarding all of that. And yet, everybody, again, who was on stage during the halftime show was apparently black, and they were all rapping about, again, warning pedophiles that they're about to get caught, and I don't know. The whole thing was confusing. Either way, I was just reading these online posts about the halftime show. Not to mention the messaging that was taking place inside of the crowd with the different lights saying game over and a number of other things. Frankly, it's almost too confusing to go into it. I would simply just say this. It's evident that the individuals who choreograph this kind of stuff haven't learned their lesson to a certain extent. And that is that the halftime show of the Super Bowl is kryptonite. That the vast majority of the people don't like it, aren't interested in it, and it's, in many cases, a career ender. It crushes people's careers. So again, I'm not sure why people flock to it and are, enjoy it or think that as some kind of a music performer or whoever or whatever you want to call what that was on Sunday, that somehow, is a good business move or a good business decision. I personally don't think that it would be, but who's to say? What I also fully understand based on the commercials that aired throughout the Super Bowl was that the advertisers themselves in these companies have not learned their lesson. They don't seem to understand that we aren't interested in celebrity, that we don't care about any of that. And that every single commercial with a celebrity in it is, again, like kryptonite. It's like listening to nails on a chalkboard or eating something that's stale. We don't like it. And I don't know anybody who's immediately attracted to it. I mean, in one commercial, you had Harrison Ford walking around as a grizzled old man, driving an electric Jeep in the middle of winter. I mean, none of that makes sense. People aren't buying electric vehicles. So Jeep hasn't figured out that Americans don't like electric vehicles. Again, we not that keen on Harrison Ford and celebrities. And frankly, you can't run an electric vehicle very well at all in the wintertime. They break down, and they're remarkably unhealthy, as we all know. But these advertisers haven't figured this out because almost every single commercial, again, had celebrities in it, regardless of the product that they were selling. This is where it gets to be jab-related. There were 2 jab commercials that stood out to me immediately, and the first was a Pfizer commercial having to do with cancer. Again, you talk about tone deaf. They haven't figured it out, or, of course, we know this as a company, they don't care. They don't care about what they're saying. They actually think they're passing one over on people, which I'm sure that they are to some extent, but the vast majority of us fully understand that any Pfizer product, let alone any shot, is a cause of cancer. Certainly, cancer-related shots that Pfizer is apparently advertising now in this particular commercial, with this kid with boxing gloves running down the street, "I'm fighting cancer," and that whole cliche line. And then, of course, again, don't worry, you can trust Pfizer because we're right around the corner with some cancer shot that's going to help you. Meanwhile, anybody who took those Pfizer COVID shots, many of them have cancer and many of them are dead. From, quote unquote, of course, turbo cancer, as it's so eloquently called. Completely tone deaf. And then the next one, of course, was the Hims and Hers weight loss shots that are delivered right to your door. These are deadly. They are harmful. They cause cancer, death, osteoporosis, heart trouble, you name it. Completely rewire the functioning of your organs as they're supposed to be. But don't worry, if you're type 2 diabetic or morbidly obese, well, you can get these weight loss shots and turn your life around, right into the grave. Completely, again, tone deaf. I don't know who they're catering these commercials to, but it's certainly not us. Speaking of shots, by the way, just the other day on the House floor while giving a speech with apparently no one in the audience per se, but there were the typical employees behind the dais, Representative John Larson, a Democrat from Connecticut, if I'm not mistaken. He basically had a stroke on camera. And if you haven't seen the video, again, it's up on my Gab page and it's on X, and I'll put it in the next war video, but my God in heaven. These politicians, again, like Mitch McConnell, are having strokes, and no one, in the middle of them actually having a medical episode, no one's yelling out, "Get a doctor. Is there a doctor in the house?" Or "Get him medical attention," or something. Have a seat. Walk up to him, pull him away from the microphone. I mean, they're just they're just letting these politicians freeze and have a clear medical episode on camera in front of a microphone, and no one's intervening. I find it astounding. Again, you talk about tone deaf. It's nuts. Here's another one, another example of tone deaf, and I'll end with this one. This was on Fox News the other day, from February 7th. It was titled, "Young Girl with Heart Conditions Denied Being Added to Transplant List Over Vaccination Status," family says. Cincinnati Children's Hospital said its decisions are, quote-unquote, guided by science. Ah, yes. This particular child was apparently adopted from China and was born with at least a couple heart conditions. As far as Cincinnati Children's is concerned, they said, quote, "At Cincinnati Children's, clinical decisions are guided by science research and best practices. We tailor care plans to each patient in collaboration with their family to ensure the safest, most effective treatment," unquote. Based on the hospital's protocol here, they're demanding that for surgical procedures, certainly for this one, the irony and the tone-deaf nature of this, that they need to be COVID vaccinated and have the flu vaccination. These people have lost their minds. So I took it upon myself to go over on X to Cincinnati Children's X page, and I decided to send them an article from a Wuhan whistleblower openly describing how the COVID shots, quote-unquote, were purposely designed to depopulate. And I decided to send that their way, and, well, I'm not expecting a reply. But unbelievable. You talk about an entire medical institution that has absolutely no idea what's going on, and if they do not care. They are in it for the money, and they are arguably the most dangerous places on planet Earth. Absolutely incredible. They even filled out, by the way, this family filled out a religious exemption that was denied. So, yeah. Cincinnati Children's, ladies and gentlemen, and of course it's probably not just them, it's probably every children's hospital from state to state. They're probably all operating in exactly the same fashion. Absolutely disgusting. Okay. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening as always, and I will catch you on Friday. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.